Okay, now with almost 25 million downloads on the podcast, Maggie podcast in the world and the United States and also everywhere, thanks to our partners at Real America's Voice doing an amazing job. Remember, Real America's Voice has got the National Pulse Show with Raheem Kassam. It's got John Solomon, all the great investigating reporting apparatus of Just the News. It is the leading edge and cutting edge of this fight. And the reason is they're putting up the news every day, 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day, they're putting this stuff up. It's incredible. I can't tip my head enough to the management team to put these shows up. And they're getting rewarded because these shows are blowing up. They're becoming huge. Why? People want to see the receipts. They don't want to hear happy talk. They don't want to hear spin. They don't want to hear it. And they don't want to hear, like, not bright people ask the questions and push it. I'm not saying we're the brightest, but, hey, we get great input from the War Room Posse. But we don't bring on this show ribbon clerks. We bring on heavyweights. We started yesterday with Navarro. And that report blew up yesterday. Ken Blackwell, that may be the best 30 minutes we've ever had, laid it down. As soon as we have the Untouchables clip, let me know when we're ready to go with that. My production team, we're doing a little live producing here. Also, guys like Steve Cortes, right? We don't waste your time. The reason is I hate my time being wasted, so I'm not going to sit here and waste my time. Certainly not going to waste your time. Breaking news, though, Maggie, about this Axios story. Axios today reported, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, Axios reported that the briefings over at the Pentagon for the landing teams have been put on suspension. Sounds to me like what I've been saying. Hey, and I know YouTube's upset about this, but you know, you're in court everywhere. You've got forensic audits going on in Arizona. You got a hand audit going on signatures down in Georgia. You've got the state Supreme Court has come back and said, yeah, the 220,000 they may have been ballot harvested, but you got to go prove it individually. Well, fine, I got that. Get to work. We can do that. It's not that hard. Takes a little money, but go do it. You got court cases flying everywhere. Guys refiling. You got Phil Klein filing in D.C. District Court. You got Jesse Morgan with his trailer. He's still looking. Why has the FBI not found my trailer yet? How hard is that? What's the latest breaking news on that we pulled out of the chat room that links to actually real sources? What do you got, Maggie?
Well, this is just in, but President Trump is supposed to meet with Acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller in the Oval Office at 3:30 today. And
that's actually on the public schedule?
That is.
Oops. Chris Miller, hey, that's another guy, legendary Special Forces guy. No, he does not mess around. And you got Ezra Cohen Watnick. I only knew him as Ezra Cohen. He threw in another name in there. Ezra Cohen, who served with Flynn in Afghanistan, is a real hero, was with us from day one on the transition team and in the White House. Now acting, I think, Undersecretary for Intel. Hello. That was actually about the Ezra Cohen. Okay, I want to go now to Steve Cortes. Do we have the Untouchables ready yet? Not ready? Okay. We got a clip I want to play from the Untouchables. And this goes back to Ken Blackwell. There's a scene in the Untouchables back, and this is for the boomers, okay? But every young person ought to watch this too. Back from the 90s, a film about the Elliot Ness and the mob back in the 1920s in Chicago, Steve Cortez' town. Sean Connery plays an Irish cop, and Kevin Costner is the young, wet behind the ears Elliot Ness, the investigator. And they have this meeting in a church, and Connery tells him, he says, hey, it's prohibition. They're all making money off illegal booze, right? He says, hey, what are you talking about? He says, everybody knows where the whiskey is. Everybody knows where the stills are. The media, the politicians, the people. They're buying booze out the back. Everybody knows it. But do you have the will to walk across the street with an axe and beat down the door? That's the question. That's the question. I think Connery's got a rosary in his hand. That's the question. That's where we are today. Everybody, even the buying guy, they know it. The American people know it. Everybody knows it. It's Ken Blackwell just laid it out. Very simple. I don't need to call it the Army. I don't need to call it the National Guard. I don't need to call it the Insurrection Act. Don't need any of it. I got Republican legislators in those states controlled by Republicans, voted by the American people. And this is what you got to understand. This is the awakening. We control 26. You get into the House, you win because you control, I think, 26 or 27 of the state party delegations, right? If you look at the map of the United States, the Trump votes all over except for some, the concentration in some blue cities. The way we are as a republic, we dominate the state legislature. By the way, that's why they selected those states to put the steel in, and then to grind you down with the media. Ken Blackwell asked a simple question. Ken Blackwell is the Sean Connery. He said to go, do you have the will to do it? And this has got to get beyond. I love the tweets, but we got to move to the next step, holding people accountable. Either you stand and deliver now, and we're not doing a sort of outcome. He's not saying the state legislature's got to sit there and go and decertify. Just provide the platform for it to be heard in an official capacity in Arizona, in Georgia, in Wisconsin, because the evidence is overwhelming. But the Democrats should get a shot at this. Hey, we have an advocacy system. That's what witnesses are. That's what evidence is. Take a shot at it. If it doesn't hold up, it doesn't hold up. I think when you see it, it's overwhelming. It's clearly going to hold up. You just need a platform. You just need a methodology. And we just got to get out of this mindset that there's there's no fairy godmother. This is not a fairy tale. This is reality. You're fighting for control of the greatest country in mankind's history. You're fighting for control of the most powerful nation, not just on earth, in the history of the earth. You think the Chinese Communist Party spent all this time in the infiltration project because they don't want control of this country? They don't know how powerful it is, its capital markets, its productive capacity, its people. They understand that. They've already enslaved one of the great civilizations on earth, the Chinese people. They've enslaved them with the help of the West and the elites in the West and the party of Davos. They already got that. Now they want it all. This is the thing about this hack. It's Russia. Remember, look at the Eurasian landmass. Korea, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and Russia. They're all junior partners in this control effort for the Eurasian landmass. Right? They're all in business with the CCP. That's the railhead of it. Got that? That's the railhead. That's the enemy. Do you have the political... And we're hurtling into two crises. One a constitutional crisis, the other a national security crisis. Biden's obviously compromised. If you don't think he's compromised, if they ever steal this, wait till you see the confirmation hearings of guys like Tony Blinken, which won't happen because Blinken will be kicked to the curb well before that. Tony, sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. You did it to yourself. So I want to bring in Steve Cortes, and we got so much to go through. He's written so many great pieces for the National Pulse, analyzing where we are. Remember, he's a hedge fund guy. He's the one guy in the Trump movement early on that pulled together, he and Navarro, the understanding of economic populism, economic nationalism, how it fits into a global program. It's not a conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen. It's the way the system works. So get all the conspiracy theory stuff and throw it all out. I don't want to hear it anymore. What did St. Paul say? When I was a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child, I talked like a child. Now I'm a man, I think like a man, I talk like a man, I reason like a man. Go back and read St. Paul. We're in a crisis. I don't have time for chasing rabbits. I want to focus on how we close this victory. Brother Cortes, help me out here, brother. What do you think of Ken Blackwell? Where do you think we stand right now?
That was fantastic. By the way, I'm going to definitely, with attribution, steal his line about the president supposedly had these massive coattails, yet he had no coat. That's genius. A terrific...
It's genius.
Now, because the president did have unbelievable coattails in this election. If we look at for example, the Cook Political Report said there were 27 House toss-up races. We won 27 of them, Steve. We literally ran the table. We, of course, believe we're going to maintain our majority in the United States Senate. And it was even better than that in the state houses. We picked up 3 state houses. The Democrats thought that they could flip 6 state houses their way. Instead, 6 went to the Republicans. So you're exactly right that we have a majority in this country. We need to act like it. One thing I will credit the Democrats, I won't credit them for much, Steve, but one thing I will credit them for is that when they win, they act like they won. They know they won when they do actually win. They didn't win this election for president on November 3rd, but we can borrow some of their, we don't want to borrow their philosophy, but we can borrow some of their tactics, and we need to act like
hold it. Before we go on, I need you to say that. I need you to go through that. Because I do admire them for the fact that they're in the minority, but the way they beat us is they act like they're in the majority, right? And this is the no whining sphere. I don't want to say they get the media, but walk through how the Democrats, being a minority party, us having basically all the state legislatures, the state houses, all these congressmen, the senators, all of this, and the executive branch. Why do we act like we're powerless and they act like they're all powerful?
Right. Well, listen, we have to change it, but one thing we can borrow from them is their discipline. That is one thing I actually admire about the Democrats and the liberals is their discipline, particularly when it comes to messaging. This is a guy who's in the business professionally of messaging now. They stay on message and they are undeterred. I'll give you a specific example about it. When Nancy Pelosi was caught, she was caught dead to rights with the footage from the hair salon, right? That she wasn't wearing a mask. She was getting her hair done, even though hair salons were closed in the state of California. It was a highly embarrassing, perhaps even volatile situation. What did she do? She came out in front of the camera and said, not only am I not apologizing, I am due an apology because I was, quote, set up by the hair salon. She actually turned the tables. Now, again, I don't want to borrow her dishonesty, right? I don't want to borrow her hypocrisy, but I do want to borrow her attitude. And that's the kind of attitude, for example, when it comes to approaching the media. Let's recognize how utterly dishonest the media is, that they are activists who are masquerading as journalists, and let's treat them accordingly. Let's not give them the courtesy of assuming that there's some level of honesty there when there isn't. So I think there are things we can learn from the Democrats. And by the way, we can learn from them. I don't mean just big picture. I mean right now, as in today and in the coming days and weeks, so that we certify that President Trump won the legal vote, because we know that he did. All of us know it. You're exactly right. It's like the Sean Connery character. We all know that we won this vote. OK, so what can we do between here and January 20th high noon to make sure that we won? A huge step in that process is the just blockbuster report put out by Peter Navarro yesterday. Every American needs to read this report, needs to amplify this report within their circles of influence.
Okay, before I get to your analysis, we're going to go. We have Cortes for a couple of blocks here because we got so much to go through. Before we go to that, we got like 2 minutes in this block. I want to go to the start of that with Martha McCallum, who's a pretty straight reporter. You could tell she was in shock when she saw these Rasmussen numbers, but the numbers across the board are even worse than that. Talk about with the media suppression of the tech oligarchs and mainstream media, how all of a sudden the nation's coming to basically 50-50. The thing was stolen. It's not a policy difference. He's illegal and illegitimate, which freaking him out. Walk us through the first part of that with McCallum.
No, that's critical. And Peter Navarro lays this out. I think it's on page 4, early anyway, in his report. His report's only 30 pages, by the way, folks. So please read it. And it's written for the layman. Even though he's an economist, even though he's an academic, he has incredible credentials, Harvard PhD. He does not write this like a PhD. It's not written for a statistician or an economist. It's written for regular people. And he cites in there the Rasmussen poll that even among Democrats, 17% of Democrats will now admit that there are irregularities at least and fraud at worst, that this election might have been stolen in favor of Joe Biden, or at least an attempted. I don't want to say that it was stolen because it's ongoing. It's an attempted theft is the way I like to say it. There's a grand larceny that is afoot. It has not been completed, and we can't let it be completed. But that's pretty astounding. And when we look at Republicans and Trump voters, most polling shows in the 70s, around 80% of Republicans do not believe that Joe Biden legitimately won. According to CNBC poll, only 3% of Trump voters believe that the president should concede, practically zero. So out of 74 million Americans, we know that a supermajority do not believe these results are legitimate. We also know that tens of millions of Americans, Steve, who are not politically astute, who just aren't interested that much in politics, they have busy lives, they're taking care of their jobs, their families, they're not paying close attention to politics. They're learning for the first time now about the China-Biden bribery scandal. They are learning for the first time about these bombshell allegations from the laptop from hell. And as they learn about that,
Steve, hang on for 1 second. We're hang on and all that. We're going to take a short commercial break. Steve Cortes, I also want to make sure officially on Safe Harbor, officially, Joe Biden was named president-elect. On the day of the Electoral College, yes, the Electoral College named officially the president-elect. Officially, it's been done, but they also officially put out the Warren Commission. Okay, we're going to come back with Steve Cortes in a second.
Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room. Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We have the great Steve Cortes with us. Steve, go through and make the case. Peter Navarro has aggregated up the information, but you've also made the case in these videos you've done. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong, on the campaign when you started the Chalk Talks, is it 18 million? How many millions of views do your Chalk Talks have? Okay, do we have
We
Steve?
did over 18 million total viewers for the 11 episodes of Maganomics. So it was like a primetime, very popular cable news show. And perhaps more to come on that score. We'll hopefully announce it on this show soon. But the Chalk Talks have become a thing. They've become very popular. I started them during the campaign. I continue to do them. A lot of them have concerned the statistical case against a supposed Biden win. Because, Steve, when I was watching these returns come in, I was at Trump campaign headquarters in Arlington, Virginia on election night. And like a lot of deplorables, of course, we were thrilled with the early returns. But as the night wore on, we started to see, number one, all of these states without any explanation, without any cause, halt their counting in these swing states. There still has not been a reasonable explanation for why they stopped in the middle of the night. Then we started to see these massive pro-Biden spikes, vote spikes that occurred in the wee hours of the morning. And because I've spent 25 years on Wall Street as a trader and my career was really assessing market probability, I have that kind of a mindset. I started to say to myself, this is completely, it went from just slightly improbable to practically, if not impossible, as the night wore on. So I got to work immediately on the numbers, and within a few days, I compiled an article which I published at Raheem Kassam's National Pulse, the statistical case against a Biden win. I published that on November 9th. The case has only grown since then, in the weeks since then. And then Peter Navarro took, I think, some of my work and really added to it as only a professional economist like he can. But to me, of all the evidence against a Biden win, the most significant are these statistical anomalies that were required for him to win. And I'll get into a couple that I think are specific. But to use a sports metaphor for just how many anomalies he needed to line up exactly in the right places on that night, it would be not just like pitching a perfect game in the World Series, which has happened. I believe it happened one time ever in the 1950s. It would be like pitching 4 perfect games in a row to sweep the World Series. That is literally the level of statistical confluence that was needed for Joe Biden to allegedly pull this off. And I think anybody would say, no, you didn't actually pitch 4 perfect games in the World Series. The umpires were cheating. Something was amiss. Something's wrong. Same thing here. And now to get specific with the numbers, and Peter does a great job of laying this out as well. Unreasonably high turnout, I think, is one of the alarm bells. And let's be specific. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Joe Biden allegedly won that city by 145,000 votes. That's about 7 times his total victory margin for the state of Wisconsin, to let you know just how important Milwaukee was for him. Turnout was supposedly 84%. 84% in Milwaukee. By comparison, Australia, a country where voting is mandatory and not voting is punishable by fine, and it is enforced. Australia has 92% turnout by comparison to Milwaukee. Even more importantly, perhaps, by comparison on November 3rd right here in the United States. Let's look at Cleveland, Ohio. Very similar city to Milwaukee. They even look alike to some degree. They are demographically very similar. Believable, a much more historically precedented number. 84% turnout in Milwaukee is simply very hard to stomach. In addition to that, when we look at the lack of vetting of mailed-in votes, I think this is critical, and Peter goes into this case extensively. I did as well in a shorter way in my article at National Pulse. The lack of vetting. What I mean by that is the rejection rate of mailed-in votes. Historically, Steve, a normal rejection rate for mailed-in votes pre-2020 is somewhere around 1%. Generally, usually it's about 3% for first-time mail-in voters. People simply make mistakes. They don't sign their ballot. They don't include a return address, or they simply weren't valid to vote. They weren't legal voters. They're illegal aliens. They're felons. They moved, all kinds of things. Typically 1 to 3% would be the range. What we saw in Pennsylvania, Georgia, unfortunately, even though the volume of mailed-in votes exploded, of course, in these states, as we saw the rejection rate plunge to almost 0 in these states. And what that tells us is there was no vetting. There was absolutely no scrutiny. And not only is that wrong because it invites fraud, but it's also wrong, Steve, because there's a constitutional issue there. That's the 14th Amendment issue. You have effectively created 2 classes of voters. You have in-person voters, primarily Trump people, right, who showed up, and there are 3 levels of scrutiny on them. Number 1, they have presented themselves, their body. Number 2, identification. Number 3, a signature. 3 levels of verification that they're valid voters. For these mail-in votes, none, literally no level of verification at all. You effectively, this is what was done in the Jim Crow South. It's why those practices were illegal, were unconstitutional in the South. Poll taxes, literacy taxes, et cetera. They were creating 2 classes of voters. 2 classes of voters were created in Pennsylvania and in Georgia. It's wrong, it's unethical, and it's unconstitutional. So the statistical case is overwhelming that the president actually won these states, and perhaps even by substantial margins. And by the way, Steve, that's even before we get into voting machines, which is, to me, that's just icing on the cake. All the potential for fraud and the perhaps realized fraud when we look at Antrim County and the forensic analysis of machines there. The point is, we need to continue to pressure these Republican legislators. We have the cure. We can't just shout at the moon about this, Steve. Let's get practical here. We need to pressure these legislatures. This is not done. December 14th was not the election, nor is January 6th. We have until the 20th of January. We have until high noon. Now, time is wasting, okay? And time is our enemy here. The clock is ticking. But let's pressure these legislatures to actually take action. What is the point of electing Republicans in these states if they're going to be a bunch of feckless eunuchs? Let's make sure that they feel the heat of the people of America who know that this election was won by Donald Trump, and he needs to be sworn in again for a second term.
Okay, you're one of the more high visibility members of the Trump movement. I would say that Steve Cortes and the people that he was able to pull together and work with, did the extraordinary job of why so many members of the Hispanic and Latino community have now come to join our economic populist and economic nationalist movement. And this is one of the things that really freaks out the Democratic Party. You see the voting in South Florida. If you even see the voting in these counties in Texas, these overwhelmingly Hispanic counties, and in Arizona. And this is a broad scope of Hispanics, all the way from the Cubans and the Venezuelans in South Florida, all the way to more of the Mexican immigrants in Arizona and Texas. So, Steve, given how high visibility you are, has anybody come back and challenged you since you came out on the National Pulse on November 9th? But you've been talking about it even before then. Has anybody come out and challenged you on any of your chalk talks, any of your videos, any of your media appearances, any of your writings about just the math and your hardcore analysis as a hedge fund guy and a trader in Chicago in the pit? Has anybody come out and challenged your assessment of the mathematics of this?
Steve, none, no, and which is very telling, isn't it? It's one of the reasons why I like to use numbers, right? I don't believe in just sloganeering. I think it's important for us to use data and numbers and real hard analytics. And I'm very careful with my homework. By the way, speaking of that, nobody does their homework more than Peter Navarro. His report in total is 36 pages, but 6 pages of those are notes. It's 30 pages of text. He has 148 citations for only 30 pages of text. Think about that. I mean, this is an academic who really did his job. Somebody who was able, with his populist nationalist views, he was able to survive in the University of California system as a tenured professor. Think of how unimpeachable his academic work had to be, given his views, to survive in the UC system. So I try to do that approach myself. And when people do come at me, no, it's stylistic criticisms. It's not about, oh, this number is wrong or your citation here is invalid. The other thing I try to do a lot, Steve, which I would recommend for all of us in the movement, as much as I can when I'm citing statistics, I try to use as citations actually liberal platforms. So I try to cite, for example, CNN. CNN, for example, when I talk about the Hispanic, to the point of the first part of your question, our Hispanic performance. In Florida, we know how well we did among Hispanics. I regularly cite CNN's exit polling in Florida, which shows that we split 50-50 the Hispanic vote in Florida. But you're also right that it's not just a Florida story. Some of these counties in the Rio Grande Valley in the south of Texas, on the Texas-Mexico border, it's incredible what we did down there, what we, the America First movement and the president did. Starr County, Texas, for example, the most Hispanic county in America, 96% Hispanic. We didn't quite win it, but we only lost it by 5 points. We had lost it by 60 points last time in 2016. We gained 55% on margin. Next door, Zapata County, 86% Hispanic. We did win Zapata County. We gained 38% on margin to win that county by 5%. Working class Latino counties, a lot of bad hombres down there who are coming around to the America First agenda. Why? Because of economic populism, because they believe in strong borders. Those people more than anybody know the problems of porous borders. And because they also rally to the America First vision of a country that believes and respects traditional values. That was key for a lot of these Hispanics. They did not want a Joe Biden to be in office. Hispanics are overwhelmingly religious people, whether evangelical or Catholic, and they did not want to allow a President Joe Biden to again target religious liberty and those wonderful women of the Little Sisters of the Poor. So we messaged very intentionally, very diligently to Hispanics. It paid enormous dividends, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so optimistic going forward. Steve, we're at the cusp of a multi-decade movement here that is going to build American sovereignty, the diffusion of power, economic protection for working class people. We are literally just getting started.
Steve, I'm going to get into all that in the next segment, but I got to say something about what you just said. And this is for everybody in our audience. Understand, but Donald Trump, this is bigger than Trump. He knows this. This fight is obviously for the Constitution and the Republic and the American people, but for everybody on our side of the football, for all of those new Hispanic and Latino voters that came, we have to show them we're standing up for them. Their votes, the bravery in their communities to go out and vote like that. If they see that we're cowards, they're going to sit there and go, what is this all about? You guys talk a big game, but you don't act like you're a big game. We're going to return in a minute to Steve Cortes. He's going to lay out why we're on the right side of history. You're seeing in the United States and globally a massive shift as the deplorables and allow Beijing say, hey, we're tired of the way this is going. We're going to make some changes. We're going to return with Cortes in the War Room in a minute.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Everybody knows where the booze is. The problem isn't finding it. Let's do some good! The problem is who wants to cross the pond.
That's the question we got. You saw Sean Connery. That's in the great film, the Untouchables, right? Everybody knows where the booze is. Do you have the guts to cross the line? Do you have the guts right now to do another movie reference? High Noon. Who's going to go meet the train? Right? That's the question. Who's going to go meet the train? A lot of people talk about meeting the train. That's what the film's about. It's an analogy, I think, about the Cold War, right? About standing up to the Soviet Union. Everybody knows what the threat is, but who's going to go down and meet the train? That's the point in history we are right now. Who is going to go meet the train? So, Cortes, you're a Chicago guy. Tell me your response when you see the clip about the Untouchables.
Right. No, listen, it's time to go to the mattresses. And I will tell you, one of the benefits, a lot of us in the movement are understandably aghast at the behavior, at the tactics of some of our Republican supposed friends and allies. For example, as I talked on your show recently, people like Marco Rubio and some of his fellow Republican senators are already clamoring to work with a President Biden to make legal illegal aliens who have trespassed into our country. So one of the we are rightly outraged at the behavior of some of our supposed comrades in recent weeks. But there's also a benefit to this current crisis, and that is that we are separating the wheat from the chaff, as it says in the good book. We are finding out who is actually with us, who actually believes in our nationalist America First ideals, and who was just along for the ride because it was expedient. And I'm talking about people not just like Rubio, but also Governor Kemp in Georgia, Governor Ducey in Arizona. So the masks have come off because these are tough days. It's tough to stand up against the prevailing conventional wisdom, against the corporate media, against the titans, the oligarchs of Silicon Valley and big business, and say, hey, wait a second, Donald Trump won this election. We're not crazy. We're not conspiracists. We're not loons. We're not kooks. Donald Trump won this election. There are statistical as well as constitutional reasons why those stated votes in these swing states are not valid, and we are going to fight for that. We're going to fight for the truth and fight for this republic because voting is in the United States, and it has to matter, and it has to be valid. So it's time for us to absolutely go and meet that train. It's time for us to stand up, to be brave and be bold, and we have to. It is our inheritance as Americans, a responsibility for us to stand up as those before us have and to hand off to our children and ultimately grandchildren a republic that is as great, if not greater, than the one we inherited.
Maggie, we got some breaking news out of the Supreme Court.
We do. The Supreme Court throws out a challenge to Trump's plan to exclude undocumented immigrants from census count.
Steve Cortes, how big a deal is this? Particularly, you're at the tip of the spear of we can get half the Hispanic vote, greater than we ever thought, and part of it is that the Hispanic citizens of this country understand that the Chamber of Commerce and the business interests in Wall Street wants unlimited illegal immigration to, guess what, drive down the cost of labor, that they have to compete with illegal aliens and African Americans. Tell us how important this ruling is, sir.
Listen, it's a terrific ruling, 6-3. Thankfully, the conservative majority in this case worked on the high court. The president's done a magnificent job in his first term of judges and justices, and that will continue in his second term. But regarding Hispanics, too, you're exactly right, Steve. You know, Hispanics, the media narrative out there, the Democratic narrative is that Hispanics are somehow soft on illegal migration. That is simply not the case at all. The people who suffer the worst from porous borders and from illegal trespassers into our country are working class Americans. And almost all blacks and Hispanics fit into that category. So who disproportionately suffers from illegal migration? It is minorities in the United States. And because of that, Hispanics, because of what they live, because of their kitchen table reality, they are not soft on these issues. The people who clamor the loudest, by the way, for allowing illegal migration to this country, notice they are always the people, Steve, who are not personally liable to the, at times, catastrophic effects of illegal migration. So what I'm talking about is people who are in the credentialed creative classes, TV anchors, partners at Accenture, people who can effectively work from home, people who do not have to compete in the labor market against illegals, people who do not suffer from the crime, the 100% preventable crime of dangerous illegal aliens who are allowed to hide in plain sight in so-called sanctuary cities in this country. No, those are overwhelmingly Hispanic Americans. For example, Steve, if you look at the terrible stories about MS-13, the transnational gang, and the awful, really atrocities that they have committed in the United States, when you read those stories, the victim, if you read the surname, it's always a Hispanic. It is always a Hispanic American. They're not committing those crimes in Greenwich, Connecticut, or in Falls Church, Virginia. No, those crimes are being committed against Hispanic Americans in barrios across this country. So Hispanics are not soft on illegal migration. We should never assume that. It's not the case. And I think one of the reasons that Trump won, according to Politico, of the 100 majority Hispanic counties in America, Donald Trump won 44% of the vote in those 100 counties. And I think one of the reasons, so we're right at the cusp of being a majority party, a majority movement among Hispanic Americans. And one of the reasons is his toughness on the border, is his belief that America first is a reality when it comes to migration. And of course, regarding this court case, regarding the census, and of course, we should not be counting illegals who don't belong here in the first place. It is time to prioritize American citizens. That was always the case, but particularly so in a time of pandemic, in a time of economic recovery. American citizens have to be our first and foremost priority.
Let's go. I want to go. We got about 8 minutes, 7.5 minutes. I want you to just take the ball. This great piece you wrote, it's kind of an essay. It's not even an op-ed. For the National Pulse, your view of where we are in the world today, and then if you could finish with your thoughts on the economy.
Sure. So I wrote this for America First, for the America First movement, and I published it in Raheem's National Pulse because I think it's important. I mentioned earlier there's a lot of consternation out there, which is understandable among our people. But what I don't want to have happen among the deplorables is we cannot devolve into a despondency of lamentations, okay? That is not worthy of our movement. It's not worthy of us as American citizens. So we have to take a very sober assessment of where is the country right now, what can we do in the coming days and weeks, and then also what can we do beyond that into the months and years ahead. And I give three. So I think first that mindset is important for us, that we cannot succumb to a pessimism. We have to be action oriented. Yes, the situation is dire. And yes, what is being perpetrated against us or in the process of being perpetrated is diabolical. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that. And we should recognize that, but we can't wallow in it. So first of all, the right mindset. And then what are the action items? And I really think there are three. The first is we need to fight. We need to continue to fight in actual courts. We need to wherever we can. And then I think even more importantly, we need to fight in the court of public opinion, as you are doing, as I'm trying my best to do. And what I mean by that is if we fight in the court of public opinion, we are going to put the commensurate pressure on these legislators around America to take their duty seriously. Republican legislators in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Wisconsin and Arizona, they need to man up and they need to do it right now. And the way we do that is by continuing to fight in the court of public opinion. The second action item, and this is frankly more for the president than for the rest of us, but again, we can properly guide, I think, as a movement, the president to this correct decision, is we need a special counsel. We absolutely need a special counsel on the China-Biden bribery scandal. I don't even like to, for shorthand, I know a lot of people refer to it as the Hunter Biden scandal, but I don't like to call it the Hunter Biden scandal because I believe he's incidental, really. He's just a bag man for the Biden cartel. What matters to us, he doesn't matter to the American voter. He was never on the ballot. He won't be. What matters to us is Joe Biden, is the big guy, is the head of the Biden cartel. Now, the Biden cartel, unfortunately, used his sold influence to him and used his name and his influence and power for decades for a really multi-decade grift. But it really went into overdrive in the last few years in terms of how they sold it internationally to the most dangerous enemies of the United States, including Russia and then, of course, most of all, China. We have the very real possibility that in just a few weeks, we could have sworn in as Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, a man who was completely compromised by the most dangerous adversary of America, the Chinese Communist Party. We simply cannot allow that to happen. One of the ways we prevent that from happening is a special counsel. I think it's necessary. Unfortunately, Bill Barr showed us that even a Trump Justice Department was unable to bring actual justice as it pertains to the abuses of the Obama DOJ. He failed us miserably during this election when Joe Biden was lying through his teeth to the American people on national television in each of the two debates, saying that his family was not taking money from China and Russia, repeating the lie, which people like John Brennan propagated, former CIA chief, that this was Russian disinformation. Bill Barr knew otherwise and remained silent. So even Trump's DOJ, we cannot count on, unfortunately, in this regard, which is why I think we need an independent special counsel to start investigating immediately all of the abuses surrounding China and Joe Biden. I believe there's going to be indictments very soon, in all likelihood, of his family members and perhaps Joe Biden himself. He certainly deserves to be indicted, at the least, for FARA violations, and perhaps much worse than that, perhaps even espionage. And then the third action item, which is a bit longer term, but we need to get started pretty quickly, is candidates. We need the right kinds of candidates. I mentioned earlier how this current crisis, has shown us who a lot of Republicans truly are. It's separated the wheat from the chaff. Well, we need a lot more wheat candidates. We need a lot more American nationals who really believe in our values, who really believe in sovereignty, in economic protection, in the diffusion of power. And I think those are the three big pillars of the American nationalist movement. We need those candidates to be recruited, trained, and financed, and ready to run for office, because we can take the House in 2022. And that's very exciting. Whether President Trump's second term begins in just a few weeks or whether it begins in 2025, there will be a Trump second term. And we need a Republican House to make him the most effective president possible. And we are on the cusp of overtaking the House. Let's do it. Let's do so with the right candidates. And then also, we need to primary a lot of these fake rhinos out there who showed their true colors. People like Governor Kemp. Governor Ducey is term limited. We can't primary him, unfortunately. But we need to primary a lot of these people who have shown us who they really are in these recent weeks. So I think candidates is also then the third bigger picture action item. And I want to encourage the deplorables out there that this is the path forward. There is a way. We need to get the president sworn in on January 20th. Absolutely. But even beyond that, there are other actions that we need to take. And again, believe that we are just at the beginning. These are early days of what will be a multi-decade movement in the United States. It's actually incredibly exciting. So when you get despondent, which is understandable because you're angry about what's going on in our country, you're angry about the lies you're being told that you have to simply accept. But instead of devolving into that despondency, realize that we have an incredible chance here to be part of history. I mean, we really do, of reasserting American sovereignty. It's as exciting as anything I can think of, Steve, in the realm of politics. And I'm going to continue to message on that, continue to write about it, talk about it in my Chalk Talks. And I think it's important for us all to embrace mindset.
Okay, Cortes, we got to bounce. We can't get to the economy, but we're gonna do that at another time because your thoughts on the economy are very important. In the short time I have left, I want everybody to understand that was almost an hour. No notes, no teleprompter. There's no way on TV you can do that. You look at all these other networks; they're all reading off a teleprompter. I've been in those; they're reading off a teleprompter, written principally by somebody else. Cortes, almost an hour, no notes, no teleprompter, as good and succinct, as powerful as anything out there. Cortes, how do people get to your social media? How do people get to you during the day?
Yeah, please follow me on Twitter. I'm at Cortes Steve, Cortes with an S. On Parler, I got my name in the right order, Steve Cortes at Parler. Please follow me.
Okay, Steve Cortes, thank you very much. Steve Cortes, a unique. By the way, any party that's got Ken Blackwell and Steve Cortes, how can we possibly not close this deal for the presidency? Any party that brings together the type of power you've got in dignity and class of a Cortes and a Blackwell in the brains. Okay, we'll take a short break. Ian Smith, join us on toxic masculinity next.
A. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room. Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. It is the 18th of December, the year of our Lord 2020. Today, pretty big afternoon. Number one, the acting Secretary of Defense, Brother Smith, who's a renowned Special Forces officer, is going to have a meeting over at the Oval Office today. And Axios, the gossip sheet of the establishment, reporting that the briefings for the landing team, that's what happens. You have a landing team, a bridgehead team, and then they take over. The briefings have been put on hold, and we're going to get to the bottom of why that's happening. But the Secretary of Defense is going to be seeing the President today. And also, by the close of business, I think technically, the Director of National Intelligence, which is the coordination unit run by Radcliffe, Congressman Radcliffe, is supposed to provide the President an assessment of the election 45 days afterwards from the intelligence community. And what we're hearing is that the involvement of the CCP in this election is being slow-walked by certain parts of the intelligence apparatus. And this is all going to inextricably link back to this hack. Remember, Russia's a sideshow. Okay, it's a sideshow. It's an economy the size of New York State. It's a demographic death spiral. It doesn't make anything the world needs. It's got some natural gas and oil. And look, there's tons of bad guys. I spent my youth, on a Navy destroyer. That our job was to hunt Soviet submarines, keep them away from carrier battle groups. We were that's ASW. We were ASW Ship of the Year for the Pacific Fleet, I think in 1978. That was our function in life. That's what we did for a living. So I know the Soviet Union and the Russians are bad guys, and they're run by the KGB. They're bad guys. But it's a country in implosion. The enemy is the Chinese Communist Party, and that's got a bunch of partners, the mullahs in Iran, the guys in Turkey, Pakistan, North Korea, vassal state, and the guys in Russia. So in the fog of war, don't let them take your eye off the ball. This indictment against Brennan and all these guys, when all this is declassified, all the lies they told about the Russia things, because they weren't doing their job, either by acts of commission or omission, were not doing their job about the Chinese Communist Party and the rise of this. Okay, I want to now turn to Ian Smith. Ian's known, and Ian you're known as the guy with the healthcare club, the gym, and you're not backing down, and you run a safe place, and now the fines are up to extraordinary amounts. But the reason I want you on, you've had these tweets, and if Denver can put them up, and not the ones in the economy, but you've had these tweets, or people are sending them to me all day long. They're blowing my phone up. It's about toxic masculinity, but you kind of take it deeper. You're saying we're at a cultural moment in our civilization, that something's wrong here, and something's wrong with men. We're going to put the tweets up as we got it, but walk us through, what is your theory of the case?
So it all ties into everything that we're all kind of fighting and talking about today, and that's, we're fighting a war against globalism, and we're fighting a war against specifically Marxist globalism. And the biggest threat to that being pulled off is strong men. The primary role of a man in any circle of society is to protect. If you can't protect anything as a man, then you're essentially worthless. You protect your family, and then as the circle grows, you protect your community, your culture, your heritage, and eventually your society as a whole. And Marxism doesn't take over by invasion. Marxism takes over by infiltration. And what they've done is they have infiltrated our society at almost every level. And in order to stop any resistance, we see a gradual weakening of men. through almost every avenue. You see it in the entertainment industry. You see it in our schools. You see it in our universities. It's all over. Men are constantly being distracted by various forms of entertainment and various vices, taking away from their strength. And then you have the public shaming on top of that. You know, it's now a bad thing to be a strong, masculine, traditionally masculine man. You have the fourth generation of feminists who have also been infiltrated by the Marxists, who scream and holler and shame any man who opens his voice and has an opinion. So what you start to get is a generation of complacent men who are afraid to speak up and who would rather turn to the television or turn to video games or turn to some other distraction instead of expressing their masculinity and doing their most primary role in society, and that's protect what is theirs. And I think it's probably the single biggest issue that we face, you know, on a cultural level today.
Well, tell me about it. Aren't you advocating? All your opponents will say, "Oh, Ian Smith, he's the railhead. He's one of the problem with Ian Smith is that he's the personification of masculinity." What say you, sir?
That sounds like fourth generation extreme feminism to me. That sounds like you have a problem with me and you're threatened by who I am as an individual. And that's just nothing more than public shaming.
By the way, we got about 2 minutes. But hold on, we got about 2 minutes. I just want to say, isn't their argument is that the problems we have throughout the world and all the wars we've had and all the desolation and everything like that is because we've been run for the last 10,000 years by the patriarchy. And it's time to have a change of command. It's time to have the matriarchy run this. And I said this very early on when Oprah gave her talk, that this is the Me Too movement, all that is the time's up movement. The time's up on the patriarchy. The time's up on Ian Smith. You got about a minute before you got a punch and a hard break. What's your response to, hey, Ian, you had 10,000 years. You guys have left us in a fix. It's time for the end of the patriarchy.
Now, I have no issue with society being well balanced. I think that there's some feminine qualities that should be, infused into our political spectrum, especially. But you can't get out of balance with anything. And what we're starting to see is a very feminine dominant society where things are ruled by emotion instead of like sort of rationale and logic. And you have these figurehead in politics who stir people's fears instead of talk logic and facts, and that is a feminine sort of attribute, and it's this ultra feminization of men in general where they want you soft, and that's going to throw things out of line much more than the past 10,000 years. We've made it so far, and things are getting worse.
Ian, we got a jump. How do people get social media? How do they get contact with you during the day?
Ian Smith Fitness, and that is on Instagram and on Twitter and on Parler. That's my handle for everything.
Ian, fantastic, great. Maggie, what do you? Maggie's going to respond today.
I was just going to say, Ian, I'm a big fan. I'm grateful for you, and I just wanted to point everyone to your new website, StayOpenStayFree.com. Incredible resource to find businesses that are standing up against the tyranny and keeping their businesses open. We're
going to have Maggie respond too about the toxic masculinity today at 5. Make sure you hear it, 5 p.m.
Absolutely. Thank you.